Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a little bit more shorter-term technical analysis on Bitcoin, because in today's video, we can see here that Bitcoin has gone ahead and broken bullish out of this rising wedge that we were talking about in yesterday's video. Just as we expected, we figured Bitcoin would go ahead and break bullish out of here. But actually, we do have some things that we need to discuss on the Bitcoin chart itself. But more importantly than that, we have some news to cover, guys, because as you may or may not know by now, Bakkt has a launch date. If you guys know anything about Bakkt, I can speak, then you will know that Bakkt is a major development in the cryptocurrency space. It's an institutional way for people to start getting into the cryptocurrency space in a regulated way so that they can start safely trading Bitcoin and not have to worry about all the voodoo, mumbo-jumbo, Wild West shenanigans that go on in the cryptocurrency market. I'm patenting that phrase, by the way. I'm copywriting that. Bakkt is a very big deal and is going to be launching on July the 22nd, guys, 2 days after Apollo 11's 50th anniversary. They talk about that extensively in this article, and we're going to be discussing all of that and more in today's video, guys. This is a very important update on Bitcoin. Bakkt launching is a huge development for Bitcoin and just a big old shot of nitrous right into the gas tank of Bitcoin's already well-performing bull market. So in today's video, we're going to be doing some technical analysis on Bitcoin, and we're also going to be discussing this major news development and why it may not be necessarily all that set in stone like this Bakkt Medium article would lead you to believe. But guys, before we dive on into it, I do want to remind you that we are still running the sale on the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy. If you're interested, use the link in the coupon code down below to go ahead and join. That sale will be running for another couple of days. Anyway, guys, let's go ahead and get started with our technical analysis, and then we're going to dive into the news from Bakkt. This is a very big deal, but we do have to get through the TA here to start with. As you guys know, Bitcoin was in this rising wedge here, rising triangle actually here over the last couple of days. We talked about this in yesterday's video, and I said that it was most likely that Bitcoin was going to break a bullish out of this. This bullish breakout may have had something to do with this news article. It did come out a little while ago. It came out very late last night, so perhaps this had something to do with it, but I think Bitcoin was going to break bullish here anyway. We've seen a lot of bullish exuberance. If we look at our moving averages, not our moving averages, our oscillators, we see that the hourly MACD is rather bullish at the moment. We see the 4-hourly MACD has been marching forward and marching upwards quite substantially for quite some time here. It's been moving to the upside ever since about the 6th or the 7th of July here, of June here. Bitcoin has been looking rather bullish, in fact, and a lot of that bullish strength hasn't left the market like we thought it might if Bitcoin did fall below here. Bitcoin seems to just want to keep rallying higher and higher and higher. And one thing I want to point out is that that actually kind of makes sense for Bitcoin, because as we can see over here at the beginning of the bear market, Bitcoin crashed very, very quickly. We crashed 70% in 53 days. If we look at the beginning of the last bull market, then we'll see that Bitcoin rallied in a very strong manner for a very long time. We really didn't have a whole lot of a correction, just some temporary stuff, and Bitcoin just kept moving to the upside, continuing all the way up to $800 before we actually saw a major pullback. So it's actually not terribly surprising that Bitcoin rallies as much as it has and hasn't seen a major pullback. Maybe this is all we need for the next couple of months. Maybe Bitcoin goes up to $10,000, rejects and trade sideways for a couple of months. That's very possible. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw Bitcoin do something like this, where we rally up to 10K and we trade sideways here for the next couple of months, and then we break through it up to like 14 or 15K closer to the end of the year. Something like that is very possible, and because of all the bearish opportunities that Bitcoin has been afforded now and not taken any of them, I think it's probably probable that Bitcoin does something like that as well. With all that said, I am quite bullish on Bitcoin, but I do want to go ahead and remind you guys that Bitcoin is currently sitting at the exact level that it needs to form a head and shoulders pattern. So right now we are at kind of a decisive point at the moment. If Bitcoin does reject off of $8,400 right here, then this very well could turn into a head and shoulders pattern. But I honestly, at this point, based on how strong Bitcoin is, and also with news like this coming out, how much the bears are being ignored and how much bearish news is being ignored and how much the bulls are getting the spotlight and how much weight bullish news is being given, how much precedence is being given right now, the fact that we've just entered a bull market, I don't think this head and shoulders pattern is going to play out, guys. I think it's just something that we need to keep an eye on, because if Bitcoin does just so happen to reject here in the next couple of days around $8,400, then it would very much look like the beginnings of a head and shoulders pattern. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but I do want you to be careful and watch this. If Bitcoin does reject here, this very well could turn into one. But the fact of the matter is we're in a bull market, and we are looking very, very bullish on Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin's probably going to break right through this over the next couple of days. We might come up here and test $8,400 for a couple of days, but eventually I think we're going to get through it. All of the technical indicators at this point seem to be pointing to that. We do, of course, still have some bearishness out on the weekly chart. Someone in yesterday's comment section asked me to look at the weekly chart, and I will will go ahead and show you what they were talking about. They would be talking about the stochastic RSI down here and the MACD, among other things. Bitcoin's MACD on the weekly chart is still looking rather weak. At least it's starting to look weaker than it was. But here's the thing. You want to read MACD based off of the change on the histogram, but you also don't want to forget that the direction and how steep the direction of the MACD's trend is also very important. MACD may be closing in on itself, but at the same time, guys, MACD is still moving very, very bullish. It's moving in the upwards direction quite a lot. And until we actually start seeing this MACD line start coming to the downside rather than moving to the upside still, I think we're still very deep into bullish territory, at least for the short term. This might be predicting something for the long term, but we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens with that. So like I said, guys, there's not a whole lot to discuss in today's video. I mainly just want to point out the little bit of danger zone that we're looking at in between $84 and $8,500. If Bitcoin does manage to reject off of that, we could expect lower lows. I don't necessarily think we're going to do that, though, guys. Bitcoin has been making consecutive higher lows for a very long time here. If we were to break that, it would be definitely interesting. At this point, I think that is the most unlikely scenario of the couple of scenarios that are the most likely, if that made any sense. One of the things I think is going to happen here is that Bitcoin's probably going to break out. It might take a couple of days. It might be Monday before it happens. But Bitcoin's probably going to break bullish here and move up to test $9,000 as a level of resistance. Kind of a zone, actually, in between about $8,800 and $9,000 right in here. I think this is where Bitcoin is headed. And the main reason I think that is simply because that's where Bitcoin headed last time. That's where Bitcoin got resistance right up here, right around $8,800 to $9,000. This zone in here is where Bitcoin topped out before. I want to see Bitcoin come up here and top out even higher next time. We had a high here. We had a higher high. What I do not want to see is a lower high. Don't want to see a lower high. That would be bad. That would be indicative of a head and shoulders pattern, actually, because the head and shoulders pattern can have a tilted shoulder line like that, but I still don't think that's what's most likely. I think Bitcoin's going to test this resistance over the next couple of days, over the next couple of weeks even, and probably break it and start heading up towards $10,000. I think at this point, with how Bitcoin is acting, with all the news is coming out, with how it's ignored its bearish technical indicators and its bearish oscillators and downright shrugged them off and continued rallying higher even when the odds were against it at sometimes, I think at this point we can be rather confident in saying that Bitcoin will be trading at $10,000 by the end of this month or about halfway through next month, probably somewhere around that time period, sometime on into July. I think it's very likely that Bitcoin could be trading up at or above $10,000. Now, I don't want to spread FOMO. I don't want you guys to go and throw your life savings into Bitcoin like Mr. Arrow Assassin 09 did a couple weeks ago. Be very careful. Just because I expect it to go to $10,000 doesn't necessarily mean it will, guys. People are wrong sometimes. Be careful with your trades. Don't FOMO in. Be responsible. And don't drink until you're 21, okay? Now that we've got all the PSAs out of the way, we can go ahead and wrap up the technical analysis portion of the video, and we can go ahead and dive on into the massive news of today's video, guys. Oh, but actually, one side note before we get into it. Another PSA. Don't trade Bitcoin SV. Anyway, diving on into our news here, putting Bakkt Bitcoin futures to the test. Guys, Bakkt has released a Medium article, and this is a bombshell, guys. On July 20th, 2019, the moon landing happened. The world marks the 50th anniversary of the first human being landing on the moon. When Neil Armstrong planted his foot on the lunar surface 5 decades earlier, he made good on what President John F. Kennedy promised would be America's moonshot bet. And in this article, Bakkt is basically comparing the launch of Bakkt and the importance that it will have on Bitcoin's market to the launch and the landing of the moon mission nearly 50 years ago. The moon landing's anniversary is coming up. It's a very, very interesting thing that we happen to be launching Bakkt around the same time. Is this intentional? Probably not. We'll see. Bakkt has been talking about launching for the last 6, 7, 8 months, and they haven't been able to because of CFTC approval, but we'll get to that in just a second because that is something that may actually delay this once again. Anyway, I'm going to skip down here a little bit. I will link this in the description of the video if I remember. If I don't, type in Bakkt blog post on Medium. This is a very important article. You want to read this through and through. I've read it over a couple of times, and I understand it. This is no small step. This launch will usher in a new standard for assessing crypto markets. Compared to other crypto markets, institutional participation in crypto remains constrained due to limitations like market infrastructure and regulatory uncertainty. This is the most important piece of this entire article, in my opinion, to be totally honest. This results in lower trading volumes, liquidity, and price transparency than more established markets like ICE's Brent crude futures contract, which has earned global trust in setting the world's price of crude oil. And basically what they're doing here is patting themselves on the back a little bit, saying, hey, we did a good, we're going to do another good for the cryptocurrency market. And you know what? I'm very okay with them doing a good for the cryptocurrency market. I'd love to see them do a similar thing for Bitcoin and help get Bitcoin established as a major, well understood and well trusted and accepted market, like the crude oil markets or the forex markets or the commodities markets or the precious metal markets, or I think I already said forex markets, but stock markets. It'd be good to have Bakkt step into the space and do exactly what they're doing, which is something we've been talking about for a very long time. But yeah, guys, essentially what Bakkt is going to be is a physically settled futures contract platform for Bitcoin, which will allow people to start coming in and trading Bitcoin in a physically settled manner. That's very important, because what you see with a lot of other basically what you see is a lot of futures contracts around Bitcoin, and they're using futures contracts as well, but instead of being settled in cash, these futures contracts that Bakkt are going to be offering are going to be settled in Bitcoin. That means that you're actually going to get Bitcoin instead of cash, which means that there's not going to be as much room for price manipulation. They don't have to worry about price discovery based on other markets like Gemini or Coinbase or whatever, or Binance. They can worry about price discovery in their own market because they're trading actual Bitcoin. I'm not going to get into all that in today's video, but that's a very important thing. That's something they do talk about down here, is the actual price discovery and how it can be manipulated very, very easily. For example, they talk about their market risks here. Number 2, untrusted price discovery mechanisms, where the price of Bitcoin varies widely from platform to platform. You need to look no further than the difference between Bitcoin on Coinbase and Bitcoin on Bitfinex. That gap is closed to being basically negligible now, but for a long time there was a $100 or $200 gap between those two Bitcoins. So which one was the real Bitcoin price? Well, most people just average them together, but that's not really a great way to do it. Bakkt's solution here, for example, is physically delivery of contract with the settlement prices based on our futures market only, with no exposure to the spot market, creating for the first time a true price discovery contract. And from this, other markets that are basically derivatives of Bitcoin can start deriving their price from Bakkt rather than from exchanges like Coinbase or Bitfinex that aren't as regulated as Bakkt is, so that we can have a lot more of a regulated infrastructure. And I know some people aren't going to be a fan of that. In fact, I know a lot of people aren't going to be a fan of how regulated this is going to be. But the fact of the matter is, guys, is that for Bitcoin to become a globally accepted cryptocurrency and for this to grow into a multi-trillion-dollar market, we're going to have to accept government regulation and work with governments and major organizations so that Bitcoin can actually be adopted. We're not going to be able to do the whole overthrow every single government and replace it with Bitcoin hegemony or anything. That's just not the way the world works. And honestly, luckily, that's not the way the world works. That'd be chaos if something like that were to happen. We want this kind of thing to happen. We want adoption for the market. We want people that otherwise wouldn't be getting into the market because they consider it risky, or because they consider it an unregulated Wild West, as I've heard some people call the cryptocurrency market. We want to give them an on-ramp to get into the cryptocurrency market so that they can feel safe, and so they can start putting their billions and billions of dollars into Bitcoin so that we can then profit because we were the ones here first. So with all that said, guys, we can read the really important article here. Still, Bitcoin price discovery, like a moonshot, requires diligent testing before launch. On July 22nd, 2 days after Apollo 11's 50th anniversary, Bakkt will initiate user acceptance testing for its Bitcoin futures listed and traded at ICE Futures US and cleared at ICE Clear US, their own clearinghouse. Guys, this is a very big deal. This is when they plan to launch it, but there's a very big but here that they did not mention in this article, because this is Bakkt talking, and of course they're not going to say anything bad about themselves. And this isn't necessarily something bad, but this is something that you need to be aware of that is not in this article, and that is that they didn't talk about CFTC approval. Bakkt needs to have CFTC approval for them to actually launch Bakkt. Bakkt was supposed to launch in December. Bakkt was supposed to launch a very long time ago. It hasn't happened yet. Bakkt is back, actually, is what it is. Bakkt has been trying to launch for a very long time, but they simply haven't been able to because they've had to be working with regulators. And that's not because Bakkt is doing anything wrong. It's just because the gears of adoption and bureaucratic nonsense takes time to weed through. And they haven't mentioned CFTC approval here. They haven't mentioned the kinds of approval that they need to launch. Maybe they have it, maybe they don't. I don't know, because they didn't mention it in this article. Whether or not they have approval is going to be very important for this launch date, because this launch date could come and go real easy if they don't have approval. If they're not legally allowed to launch the platform, they can say they're going to launch it whenever they want. They can say they're going to launch it in 1902, but they can't launch it without approval. They can't launch it without the government saying, okay, it's okay. We have regulation, and you are allowed to do this. Because one of the big selling points about Bakkt is that it's regulated. They couldn't do it on principle, and they can't do it physically because it'd be illegal. They have to be able to launch launch with regulation, and they have to be able to launch it with approval. So we're going to be watching out here over the next couple of weeks as this deadline and as this launch date approaches to make sure that they actually have approval. If they have approval, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to launch. It seems like they've had plenty of time to get all their ducks in a row. But if they don't have that approval, this date could come and go. So while this is very bullish news for Bitcoin, and while this does lend a lot of credence to the argument that Bitcoin is now in a bull market and that the next couple of years are going to be bullish for Bitcoin, while this is probably one of the biggest news stories of the year to date, if they don't actually have CFTC approval, which they haven't mentioned in this article, I've read the whole thing, they didn't mention it anywhere. If they don't actually have CFTC approval, July 22nd could come and go, and it could mean absolutely nothing. That's probably not going to happen. I don't think they would be so bold as to put an exact date down and say we're launching today. At least they wouldn't do it again and not actually have approval. So maybe they think they're going to have it. Maybe they don't have it yet. Maybe whatever's going on. The point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that if Bakkt launches, this is going to be a very big deal for Bitcoin. It's one small step for Bitcoin, one giant leap for cryptocurrency kind, I guess you could say. Bitcoin is going to be going to the moon, and Bakkt seems to be the ones that are going to take us there. Anyway, guys, this is very bullish news. I'm very happy to hear this, but do keep an eye out for news relating to CFTC approval for Bakkt. That's going to be a very important thing that we need to keep an eye on, guys. So, guys, before we wrap the video up, I do want to ask you a couple of questions. Where do you think Bitcoin is headed here on its way up to $10,000? You think Bitcoin is going to reject here and actually form this head and shoulders pattern I talked about? Do you think Bitcoin is going to go ahead and come up here to around $9,000 and reject? Do you think Bitcoin is going to come up here to $10,000 and reject? And do you think you're going to hit that like button? Because if you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button. I got you there. You thought I was going to say something about the market, didn't you? You just got trolled. Anyway, guys, the point I'm trying to make here is that Bitcoin is looking very bullish on the short-term time frames, and especially after this news of Bakkt putting us on the back of their rocket ship on the way up to the moon. Guys, the rest of the cryptocurrency market is looking very bullish for the next couple of years as well. There is a very bright future for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is about to make us all a lot of money if we know what we're doing. And that's a very big if, guys, because a lot of people that are in the space right now are relatively new to the space. Tell me in the comment section down below if you've been in the space for less than a year. Because if you've been in the space for less than a year, you probably still got some learning that you need to do, and you still need to be preparing for this coming Bitcoin bull market. Knowledge is power, information is key, and understanding how these markets work is incredibly important to being able to actually trade these markets. And guys, I'm going to be brief here, but that is why I did launch the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy on September 23rd of last year. We had dozens of people join the day of launch. We've had over 600 people, or actually just under 600 people, excuse me, join the course since then, and they've all seemed to be enjoying it greatly, guys. A major Bitcoin bull market is coming. I don't think any of us would disagree on that, but for you to actually make the most out of this Bitcoin bull market, you're going to need to know what you're doing. So guys, if you don't have any idea what you're doing in the market, or even if you are an advanced trader and you just need to flush up on some of your skills, check the link in the description, use the coupon code JUNE2019, and join the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy. We have a lot of people in the course. None of them ever complain to me about it. They never say if there's something wrong here, there's something wrong here. They always just tell me how much they enjoy it and how much it's helped their trading. So if you guys do want to learn how to do cryptocurrency technical analysis, I do highly recommend CT2A. Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for today's video. Like I said, if you haven't already, go ahead, absolutely destroy that like button. What I want you to do is put that like button on top of a Saturn V rocket and launch it to the moon and crash it right into the moon. I think that would be a valid way of hitting that like button. Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for today's video, and I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.